Good evening. This is Dale Wetzel. This is the Legislature Today radio show. We're coming to you from the Peacock Alley American Bar and Grill in downtown Bismarck, North Dakota. I'm here with Representative Kathy Hawkins. She's a Republican from Fargo, and also Representative Kylie Overson. She's a Democrat from Grand Forks. We're going to be talking about the abortion bills that the governor signed today, and we're going to talk about how that issue has affected the legislature and how it could affect the elections next year. Also here with my co-host Gary Emneth, who is busy scrutinizing the martini menu at the Peacock Alley American Bar and Grill and trying to scam a free drink from the bartender downstairs. Just as we're going on the air, he's yelling at somebody for trying to get some free drink, I think. He is, in fact, here it comes right now, and my goodness, there it is. It's a marvelous-looking thing. It has 2 olives. It has a bit of olive juice, and it's a wonderful martini glass. It makes you look more like James Bond every day, Gary.
Well, that's about where it ends.
So tell us about Teeny Tuesday, sir.
Well, Teeny Tuesday is where they have martinis for half price at Peacock Alley. So it's a great night outside. It's not freezing. It's warm out. There's no ice on the streets. Sun's out. It's going to get warmer for a couple days, but on Teeny Tuesdays, they have martinis for a half price. So what I have here, Dale, is they have 25 different martinis here at Peacock Alley. And I ordered one that is just it's funny you would say that. I ordered the 007.
Yes, you did. It's because you're Daniel Craig reborn.
Oh, yeah, right.
Or Sean Connery, whichever you prefer.
Oh,
okay.
for sure.
Yeah, about 85-year-old Sean Connery. But anyway.
Hey, he's still hot.
I had a gin, which is a Tanqueray gin, and I had a dry one. So, Dale, what does that mean if you have a dry martini?
I have no idea.
No vermouth.
No vermouth. There you go. And it's dirty. What does it mean if it's dirty?
A little olive juice.
Very good. So I ordered a 007 dry martini, dirty. So I wanted extra olives because I mostly ordered for the olives.
Okay.
So, Representative Hawkins,
that's like buying Playboy magazine for the articles, isn't it?
Isn't that what everybody does?
That's what I did.
Yeah, and the cartoons.
Find them in a dresser drawer that you aren't supposed to be looking in or something. So let's talk about Okay. Representative Hawkins, you like martinis once in a while.
I
Tell
like
us
a
what you
martini
like.
on occasion.
She knows much more about martinis than either of us.
I grew up
That's
with martinis. Not that I was drinking them, because, of course, I didn't drink till I was 21.
Of course.
Right. But I learned to like Cosmos, but then I was on this low-carb diet. So I just took out the Cointreau and had vodka with a little cranberry in it. So it was not nearly as fattening. Good for you.
Sounds good.
Kylie, do you drink martinis once in a while?
I do, and the espresso martini here is wonderful. It's my favorite.
So you get caffeine with the alcohol, so
Absolutely.
that works against. That's kind of like the Red Bull thing they do, right?
Yeah, you can be a wide-awake drunk. It's perfect.
That's how that works. So, Dale, you got serious things you want to talk about. You had a busy day at the legislature, but we wanted to talk about Peacock Alley, which is a fun place to broadcast from. You get noise in the background, but it's kind of quiet in here tonight, Dale, because everybody looks like, well, some of the people went to a concert, or maybe a comedian, I guess.
Yeah, he's a comedian. Tracy Morgan is in North Dakota.
He's funny.
He is at the Bell Mayhews Auditorium, which is a wonderful place to take in a show. It holds about 800 people. It's a very small, intimate place, and I've seen a number of acts there, and it's great. And I can't imagine going to see a bawdy comedian there, but hey, I'm trying to become more broad-minded in my old age. So,
well, they did say be prepared for an adult audience, and it was a caution I noticed when I looked on the website to figure out who Tracy was, a little bit more background on him. But anyway, I think a few people piled out of here. They had dinner and headed over there. So, but tonight we're going to talk about serious stuff. So,
the big news today was not so much what the legislature did, but what the governor did. He signed 3 of the 4 abortion bills that are going to be presented to him at some point. The 4th one is, I think it's fair to say, the least significant of the group that we have. It bans abortions at 20 weeks or more after conception, on the belief that a fetus at that age can feel pain, and it also includes some language that would forbid the legislature from, or forbid, I should say, the university system from taking money from organizations that support abortion. This has to do with a grant that was given to North Dakota State University for a sex education project, a way to identify teens at risk and try to prevent them from it's a sex education project. And this, once the news of this grant came to light, some of the anti-abortion legislators in the legislature got quite perturbed about it, and that is why this language is in the bill. And this bill specifically is in the Senate right now to see if the Senate will agree to some House changes to it, and those changes are the prevention of funds from a organization that promotes abortion, if I could use the term, being able to provide aid to a university system, a college. The three bills that Jack Dalrymple signed, one of them forbids abortions at 6 weeks. That is when generally a fetal heartbeat is detected. And in fact, that is the language of the bill. It forbids an abortion if there is a fetal heartbeat detected. Another of them requires a doctor who performs abortions in North Dakota to have admitting privileges at a nearby hospital. Now, this, in essence, would require the only abortion clinic in North Dakota, which is in Fargo, to find new doctors because they are not presently able to admit patients to a Fargo hospital. And this is intended in the arguments of opponents essentially to harass the clinic and make it more difficult for them to get doctors to do abortions, because according to the clinic itself, there is really no safety enhancement to be had by this sort of regulation. The third one would ban abortions that are done to eliminate a fetus with genetic abnormalities or because the fetus is of a different sex than the parent desires. These are all bills that the governor signed today, and this was a day after there was a rather large rally in the Capitol's Memorial Hall urging him not to do so, urging him to veto these bills. And I was asking the Secretary of State this afternoon if he'd gotten any indication from folks that there was a move to refer these bills, to put them on the ballot this summer for gather petition signatures and have a referendum on these three bills. And Al Jaeger said he hadn't heard that much about a referral, but he's had people asking him how many signatures does it take to recall the governor. And that takes almost 80,000 signatures. That's a rather formidable task, but you do have a year to do that. The referendum option, you'd need approximately 14,000 signatures, a little less than that actually, over 3 months. This is the difficulty of a referendum, is that you have 90 days after the bill is filed with the Secretary of State to gather the number of signatures that you need to put something that you object to that the legislature did on the ballot. And that's a difficult task. But then these bills have fired up a lot of people across North Dakota. The legislature has, my whole time in the legislature, which goes back to 1987, there has been these abortion bills. They come up and they usually lose. They've usually lost. Almost all of them have lost. There was one that in 1991 that was banned abortion except in cases of rape, incest, and when the mother's life was in danger. The governor at the time, George Sinner, vetoed that bill, and it went away. Then a similar bill came up 2 years later, and it was defeated in the House. But now we have a full panoply of abortion bills that have passed the legislature. This is the real thing, and we're going to see how this affects North Dakota's reputation nationally, because this is getting a lot of national attention. We're going to see how it affects, the general public discourse. And go ahead, Gary.
Dale, question: is this as strict as what South Dakota did a couple years ago, or not?
More.
It's more strict. Okay. I've been talking too much actually. We need to turn to our guests here. Representative Hawken and Representative Overson both oppose these bills. We're going to have in the second half hour two legislators who supported them. And Representative Overson, I mean, this is your first session.
It is.
You're a young woman. I presume that I can't have an abortion, obviously. And I mean, I want to ask your opinion as a young woman, as a new legislator. What is your reaction to this?
Absolutely. Well, I mean, there's a number of things that concerned me about the whole package of bills that we were presented with. But as a young woman, particularly the bills that prohibit abortions, but they have the exception for medical necessity or something along those lines. If I go through a pregnancy and have complications, I don't want to know that my doctor first has to consult legal counsel before he can make any decisions. That really complicates the process. It puts my life in danger if we get to those situations. But further, these rights have been long upheld by the courts, 40 plus years. I didn't expect to come here and have to defend those rights as a young woman. I think that's outrageous, and it's saddening. You saw the rallies yesterday all across the state. Men and women alike came together to protest this. People are really upset by what is happening, and most of this action is coming from out-of-state organizations. So it's disappointing.
You represent the University of North Dakota. It's part of your district. You're a former student president. What is the reaction on campus that you've heard as these bills have come forward?
Yep, I think a lot of young people are really upset by this, especially those who haven't yet started their families. They're looking to move out of the state if things like this happen as young women, as young professional women who would otherwise stay here. We would be in a dangerous environment if we choose to have families and move into that. And from the university district, I think a number of the students took place in the rally yesterday in Grand Forks. I saw a lot of pictures of a lot of my friends who were there. A lot of people on both sides of the aisle, maybe even some who might identify as pro-life, but realize that this is a radical change in the legislature.
Representative Hawken, is this, you're a Republican, Representative Overson is a Democrat. To what extent does this issue cut across party lines?
I think a great deal more than people realize. I cannot tell you, I bet I have 500 emails from Republican women from the last week saying thank you. That doesn't mean that they aren't pro-life. It simply means it's not the government's decision. And the Republican, my card that is next to my bed that says I am a Republican because one of the biggest ones there is personal responsibility. That's not. The bills that were signed today are not personal responsibility. That is someone telling me one of the most important decisions in a woman's life. Or, God forbid, someone is raped. We are cutting off a perfectly legal medical practice and making it illegal. It would be like for a man if you had prostate cancer and we decided you could not have surgery. Or you couldn't have the radiation. You just have to live with it. There's not a lot of difference there. And I have said for years, if men had babies, this would not be a discussion topic. Why we want to infringe on people's personal decisions is beyond me. Guns have more rights than women. We don't have a mandatory seatbelt law in the state of North Dakota. There's something wrong here, and it bothers me greatly that the Republican Party has become the poster child for this, because I'm a Republican, even though there are a lot of people who say I'm not. I'm a Republican, and I know why I'm a Republican, but it isn't on this issue. But there are a number of Democrats on this side. It's both sides of the aisle, but it isn't a decision the government should ever make.
One of the reasons I mentioned this is because Dina Butcher, who is a long-standing Republican, a former Republican candidate for Agriculture Commissioner, a former deputy to Republican Agriculture Commissioner Kent Jones when he was in office, made a very impassioned speech at the rally in Bismarck, saying that these bills were wrong, that these bills contravened Republican philosophy of staying out of individual people's business unless there's some sort of really need for it. And there were a number of people that I spoke to who were at the rally who said, I am a Republican. I vote Republican, and now I'm going to think real hard about voting Republican in the next election, And I wanted to ask both of you about what you think the dynamic will be at play in the next election next year, because there is going to be a constitutional amendment on the ballot that says that North Dakota shall defend life from
that's a bad bill.
And it's going to be on the ballot. Shall defend life at all stages of development.
One of the concerns with that, as we're talking about it, is that my husband gave a kidney to his brother, with the personhood, that is something that could cease to happen. End-of-life directives, pharmacy dispensing medication, all of these things could be unintended consequences of the personhood bill. An embryo really cannot live on its own. So to give it all of the rights of a person is going a little too far. And it came from out of state. That did not come from the state of North Dakota. It came from a national group that are in here because we're a conservative state. And they thought, yep, if we can pass this here. They tried it in Mississippi. Mississippi, the voters voted it down. I was shocked. But I'm hoping the voters here are smarter than Mississippi because it's not okay.
Representative Overson, how do you think that this will affect the political dynamic next year? Will this make it more likely that, frankly, the Democrats will do better in the next election?
I think what it'll do is bring forward more candidates that are reasonable and see the real consequences of these actions. We've already had a number of people step up to run for office. We just saw Debbie Mathern out of Fargo say she's going to run for office again. She was a former lieutenant governor candidate. I think it'll bring more people to the ballots that maybe otherwise wouldn't have come because they're really passionate about this issue. Men, women, seniors could be affected by this issue, healthcare providers, across the board. This is really, really upsetting a lot of people. So I think it'll affect the outcomes as in the number of people that show up to vote.
I know we're going to run out of time, but the other piece, we do have the voter piece, so that everybody in North Dakota is going to get a chance to say how they feel. But between now and then, we are going to spend an inordinate amount of money defending these because they're all going to court. It could be in the millions of dollars. Now, you know me because the last time I was here, we were talking about child care. Child care is an important thing to do. A lawsuit on a bill that should never have been there, that we know going in is unconstitutional, I find it hard to rationalize that. I find it hard to explain it away because we are elected and we take an oath to uphold the Constitution. I can't vote for something that I know is unconstitutional.
The governor, in his statement that he issued, and I believe it was emailed to all the legislators, made reference to that. He said that I'm talking about the fetal heartbeat bill now, and I'm reading from his statement. He says, although the likelihood of this measure surviving a court challenge remains in question, this bill is nevertheless a legitimate attempt by a state legislature to discover the boundaries of Roe v. Wade. And he says the constitutionality of this measure is an open question, and also says that you should give the Attorney General some money to go to court.
No joke.
I mean, is this a legitimate reason to sign the bill?
I think he had a legitimate reason to not sign it because I don't think it's constitutional, and it has been proven so in a number of states. So I question that. And I mean, you know, Jack Dalrymple is a personal friend of mine. I'm disappointed.
Representative Overson, is it legitimate to sign a bill, in your judgment, because it might be upheld?
Absolutely
or we
not.
want to explore the boundaries of Roe v. Wade?
No, I don't think that is the state's job. I think when we have needs, as Kathy mentioned, like child care, education, that aren't being met, that we're killing those bills, we're killing that funding that would improve actual lives, and instead paying for legal fees, we are not doing our job.
We aren't given money for weatherization because, you know, we don't want to have another program, but we're going to go to court. You know, so there's a disconnect there. You said a little bit ago, and I think this is important. I've been around long enough, and I'm old enough. I'm not sure this will have any effect on the next election. I think the legislature mirrors somewhat the state. And there have been other years where I've thought, wow, we're going to get hacked on some of this, and it doesn't happen. So that remains to be seen. This could be different, but probably not.
Are you being jaded, or are you being realistic?
No, I think that you know, certainly, you know, with the personal responsibility piece, everybody has their own opinions, and North Dakotans definitely do. and we'll see. We'll see. I think it's going to be harder to find candidates to run. And I have a prerequisite. I would like them all to have a brain. There are days I'm not real sure that has been followed. When I started, I think we had an IQ of 50. I think we're about 30 now.
One of the things I wanted to ask both of you is that, is it worth it to run for the legislature if you know that one of the primary topics is going to be abortion?
I think it's important that those of us who stand on the responsible side of this issue are here. We need to be here fighting for these rights and making those statements. Whether or not it makes a difference in the legislature, we saw how good we did on the floor, but somebody's got to be fighting for this. And as a young woman,
the best ever.
Yeah.
On the House side. Mm-hmm. Back in the 60s, a really good Republican woman, Aloha Eagles from Fargo, stood up the first time around. And then the women were very lucky to have a role model like Janet Wentz. So people said, why did you say anything? It would have been much easier to be quiet. And that's maybe true, but it wouldn't have been okay. Mm-hmm. I have 3 granddaughters. I have a daughter. I have a daughter-in-law. And I care. And I don't want anybody else telling them what they should do with their bodies. Now, I'm old, so I'm not going to be having any kids. But I could need a procedure that I'm not going to be able to have because of the irresponsibility of these bills.
Anything you wanted to add to that, Representative Overson?
No, Kathy said it very well.
Well, we've been speaking to Representative Kylie Overson. She's a Democrat from Grand Forks, represents the University of North Dakota as part of her district. We also have been speaking to Representative Kathy Hawken, who's a Republican from Fargo, and they both opposed 3 anti-abortion bills that Governor Jack Dalrymple signed into law today. Coming up in the next half hour, we're going to have Representative Betty Grandy and Senator Margaret City, and both of them were supporters of the... Hello, this is Dale Wetzel. We're coming to you from the Peacock Alley American Bar and Grill in downtown Bismarck, North Dakota. We're speaking today about 3 anti-abortion bills that the governor...
They're pro-life bills.
Okay, the pro-life bills that the governor, Jack Dalrymple, signed today. And we have 2 supporters of those bills with us right now. Senator Margaret City, who is a Republican from Bismarck, and Representative Betty Grandy, who is a Republican from Fargo. And I believe you're both up for election next year if you choose to run. Am I correct?
If we choose to run, we
Yes.
are.
Yes, we are.
And so it'll be an interesting campaign in those districts at least. Ladies, we had a couple of folks on before now who made the argument that somehow these bills are the product of national groups that do not support abortion rights. I wanted you to address that. I mean, because I've seen bills such as these in several sessions, and I didn't get the idea that they were some sort of national project.
Not at all. I was fortunate enough to go to the national convention, and in the platform of the Republican Party, we see very clearly that they are in support of a human life amendment. And that inspired me, as I've told the story to others. I went on Wikipedia and started Googling the Human Life Amendment, saw it in so many different forms, saw that it almost passed in Congress by 1 vote. It lost. And so I just got thinking about what can we do. And Betty was at a meeting in early January when a lot of pro-life people got together, legislators from both House and Senate. We shared our ideas. We talked about how to improve these bills. And so these did not come from outside organizations.
Well, as a matter of fact, on the heartbeat bill, it was something I've worked on personally for a couple of years. And before even other states have brought this up, I had already started working with our legislative council. And a couple of years ago, I looked at it, and we were looking at the draft, and I said, you know what, I'm still not happy with this. I don't think it's the right time. I don't think it's worded right. We need more research. And we waited, and we drafted it for this year, and it's exactly what we wanted. It's based solely on medical and technology, the advancements over the last 40 years. And it's put together to meet exactly what the criteria of Roe v. Wade is.
Can you just talk about why do you think this year in this legislative session that these bills and a constitutional amendment, which we can talk about as well, were successful.
I think the time is perfect for this type of a discussion.
What makes it perfect?
Just in the fact that we know that we live in a pro-life state. If you understand the history of North Dakota in its territorial days passed a resolution that said we are a pro-life state and there will be no abortions in our territory. And 6 months before Roe v. Wade was passed, North Dakota passed a resolution stating we're an abortion-free state. And with that, we know we are that is what our citizens believe in. That's what they wanted. That's their life, the way they live their lives. And we hear that from our constituency constantly. The thousands of people that have plowed this road way before we ever came along to this. I mean, the people that I have watched and listened to and visited with, that what do they see as what is so important to them was these particular bills.
I can speak from the Senate side. I think a lot of senators were very frustrated last session when they were denied a vote on this life bill that had passed in the House twice. And then when we saw the primary process play out the way it did up in the northeastern part of the state, and we saw who was elected from those areas, I think it just confirmed in all of us that, yes, our constituents are pro-life, and it really invigorated the cause. And so I think that's really what got so many of us thinking in the pro-life arena.
Did you have any doubt, if that's the word, that the governor would sign these bills?
I didn't.
No, I didn't either.
And why did you not?
Well, because during the campaign, I had very specifically asked the governor's staff what he would do if he were confronted with strong pro-life legislation, and I was assured that the governor was pro-life.
Well, and same with me. I mean, I know that Jack is a pro-life gentleman, and he would sign those bills. He is also a governor that looks at it and says, the legislature sets the policy, and we will put it into effect, and that's what he did.
Are you concerned, if that's the word, about the possibility of a referendum for any or all of these bills?
Well, I'm not concerned. It could certainly happen, but I don't think that the people of North Dakota will uphold a referendum. I think that they will uphold the legislators. I think they will uphold life.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, we know because we've been in the fray for so long on this that we are a pro-life state, and they would vote to uphold these. You know, it's very simple. When you look at the legislative body as these came through, nearly 2/3 of the body voted in favor of these bills on a bipartisan nature. That tells us right there that the citizens are behind us on this.
Yeah, one of the things that I think is true nationally is that the Republican Party is perceived as the pro-life party, and the Democratic Party is perceived as the party that supports abortion rights. But there were Democrats that voted for these bills in the North Dakota legislature. Is that
yes,
not
absolutely.
Yes, there were.
Yeah. And that's been the case for some years, hasn't it?
Always.
Absolutely.
Yeah. The one of the issues here, and the governor mentioned it in his statement in which he announced he was going to be signing these bills, or that he had signed them, was that this is going to cost money, that there's going to be legal challenges to these bills. Is that a reason for not supporting these bills, because there's going to be a legal expenditure to defend them?
Absolutely not. You know, I've said to so many people, just imagine what is the price of 1 mile of highway. And 1 mile of interstate 20 years ago cost $1 million. The utmost that people are talking about is spending $1 million. And then I've put it in personal terms and said, what is the average person's earning power over a lifetime? It isn't my experience to earn $1 million, but for many people in our society, earning $1 million in their lifetime is very much within the realm. And so if you're going to look at in purely economic terms, you can see the value of one human life. But more importantly, what we are doing by preserving life and in protecting unborn life is we are affirming life at every stage. since Roe v. Wade and since abortion has become the law of the land, we have seen increased infanticide, child abuse, all sorts of other problems have come up. And I firmly believe that when a society goes back to its roots and starts to affirm life and uphold life and family values and structures, that will have a ripple effect throughout all of society.
Well, I think, too, on the legal side, we have set aside money repeatedly for railroad rate lawsuits, EPA lawsuits. We've brought in outside counsel on each of these issues. We have dealt with air quality issues and the green energy issue in lawsuits just as simple as North Dakota versus Minnesota lawsuits and how much money we've spent on that. We have three, I'm on Appropriations Committee. We have 3 different agencies that have come in asking for lawsuit money dealing with other issues. This is nothing new. We are here to put forth legislation. Everything we pass out of the legislature, signed by the governor, is constitutional and it stands on its own. We are not the ones bringing forth a lawsuit. We are not doing that. It is the challenge from the outside coming in here. And granted, they're bringing in outside attorneys to sue our state. They're bringing on the cost to the citizens. We are not. They do not need to challenge these. We have set forth, this is the law of the land for North Dakota. Then that can just lay and stand. It doesn't have to be considered a lawsuit.
These 3 bills are going to take effect this summer, and next year we're going to have a vote on a constitutional amendment that Senator City you sponsored that says that the state of North Dakota is going to protect life at all stages of development. First of all, could you tell me about the genesis of that amendment? And also, can you tell me how you explain it to people? What does it mean? What is its practical application?
Well, I like to liken it to Ronald Reagan's Human Life Amendment. It is a human life amendment. It is specifically written for North Dakota's Constitution, because in North Dakota's Constitution we say that the government is instituted for the protection of people. And that's exactly what we're saying, that each individual, each human being has an inalienable right to life that must be recognized and protected. And it's not just going to be looking at the unborn, but it's going to be looking at protecting life at all stages. And I think that is so important in this day and age when we're hearing that the Affordable Care Act might have death panels and there might not be enough money for people with Alzheimer's disease or something else. In North Dakota, we want to affirm that we believe in life and we are going to protect that life. We're not going to artificially prolong it. We're not dealing with any of that. All of that is already in place in law. But what we are saying is that we are going to protect life at all stages.
Representative Grandy, what do you see as being the practical application of the constitutional amendment that Senator City was just describing?
Well, I think she has been so wonderful about explaining all of this because she is such an expert on this area, and it's not an area I have spent a lot of time with. As the senator mentioned right away, we got together at the beginning of session. She had been working on her areas and I was working on mine, and now they're crossed over and we've passed them, and that's how it is. This idea that we have collaborated and worked in all of these areas is really not true. I mean, I had to, when we crossed over after crossover, we had to meet together and go, what is your bill doing? What is my bill doing? How are we going to deal with this? And so I love to let her really be the person who explains it so well because she's so eloquent in her words.
The reason I was wondering was I imagine that people are going to come up to you and you won't have the benefit of having Senator City sitting here, and they're going to be coming up to other legislators as well, and they're going to say, "This amendment, it sounds. What does it mean? What is its application?"
Well, let's talk about it in practical terms. Whenever we deal with the Constitution, we're talking about a broad framework that is a protection of our basic rights. This goes in the portion of the Constitution that's called Declaration of Rights. And just as when we read the U.S. Constitution or the Declaration of Independence, it doesn't lay out penalties. It doesn't have specific details as to how it's going to be enacted. If it is passed, I'm sure that the legislature will put into place very specific portions of law to address the specific details that arise.
One of the things that's been stated about this amendment in some of the accounts I've read is that it bans abortion. Is that correct?
I think it does, absolutely, because we are saying that we are protecting life, and the inalienable right to life of every human being at any stage of development must be recognized and protected.
Does this, I was thinking about this subject yesterday, does this prevent North Dakota, say, for example, from enacting the death penalty?
Absolutely it does. But you know what? I have had people come to me over the years and say, why doesn't North Dakota enact a death penalty? And I've said, well, I'll never be a sponsor of it. I value human life too much. And when I've asked citizens at different occasions what they think about the death penalty, I've had one person tell me that he wanted it in the 10 years that I've been in and out of office.
You know, in my 16 years, almost 17 years, I've had one time in my freshman year coming in, are you in favor or not in favor of the death penalty? It's not an issue in North Dakota. You know, that hasn't been. We are a life state, and that's how it's always been.
Well, I do remember the last time we had a death penalty bill that failed in the Senate rather decisively, and it never made it to the House.
I think, too, go back to a little bit about the SCR 4009. We already have in our law listed about the definition of a human life, and that's already current law. So, and really the amendment itself just enforces what we already have in current law.
Senator City, I wanted to ask you as well, as you know, there's some litigation which Representative Granity is intimately familiar with in Fargo, about a bill that was approved 2 years ago that prohibits medication abortion is the term that's used. Mm-hmm. And part of there's litigation filed by people who don't like this law, and they are making the argument, one of the arguments that they're making is that the North Dakota Constitution itself guarantees the right to abortion. And I was wondering, Senator City, was that one of your reasons for sponsoring this amendment, is to contradict that argument?
You know, that's a great question. It was not originally. It didn't even occur to me originally, but ever since this has gotten some momentum going, so many people have said that to me. This is such an important constitutional amendment, because if someone comes out and says that we need to have, that the Constitution guarantees a right to abortion, we say, oh no, the people of North Dakota have spoken, and we have in our Constitution a special provision that protects life at all stages. And so this is the perfect antidote to that lawsuit.
Mm-hmm. Well, and really this lawsuit that is still pending, and it's sitting out there for over a year now, waiting for any kind of a ruling, something to work with. Really, it's the same attorneys from New York out of reproductive rights that will come in, and they're threatening the lawsuits now, and so it's very interesting to me to see that. And you opened up with, is this something that's collaborative effort and all this type of thing? No, the collaborative effort comes from the other side, from National Planned Parenthood, who is the money behind what is called reproductive rights, who are the attorneys out of New York that come sit at the table and do their thing in North Dakota. The Supreme Court told us as state legislators to look at this issue and to deal with it at the state level. And that's what we're doing.
And, I just want to echo that. In committee, we had a man that was sitting there that was most interested when we were doing all of our committee work on these bills. And I finally went over to him at a break, and I said, are you perhaps an attorney from the UND Law School or something? He said, no. And he introduced his name. He's the lobbyist for Planned Parenthood. And he was very upright in saying that. And so when people think that this is all about states' rights for abortion, I'm sorry, it's not. There's huge money at stake here. We've been hearing that Planned Parenthood has targeted North Dakota as the number one state that they want to dump money in, that they want to try to defeat these bills. And we saw that up close and personal in committee.
How do you think that this might this not come to pass, what you just mentioned? That there will be a rather large and well-financed effort to defeat maybe to have a referendum on these bills, maybe to defeat the constitutional amendment next year?
Oh, I know that there will be money. They say that a decade ago, Planned Parenthood dumped $8 million into South Dakota, and I did not enter into this lightly. The one wonderful thing is we had unity of all of the pro-life groups, and I spoke to those pro-life groups individually and asked them if they're going to be able to help us do some fundraising and help us defend this bill, and I've gotten pledges of support, and so I'm hoping that they will come through for us, because it's going to take a lot of money to fight it.
How do you think that this, I'd like to ask both of you this, because I imagine, you'd be interested in anyway, but should you both choose to run, you're both up for election next year. And next year there is not a governor's race, there's not a Senate race, the top of the ticket is the House, and there's some statewide offices, but this is the constitutional amendment that you sponsored, Measure 1, is going to be the thing on the ballot. It's going to be the thing that people are talking about. And how do you think that this is going to affect the dynamics of the election?
I think it's going to be one of the most costly elections that Betty and I have ever been in our lives.
I guess so, because I was told that in the paper, I guess I don't have time to read through all the papers, but that they had somebody announce they're running against me already, of which I find interesting because, there's two of us on the ballot. If I choose to run and if Representative Carlson was to choose to run, he and I would be running against one person unless they find more people to run. Last time they found one person to run against the three of us. But, that's fine. Every seat is an open seat. I have always believed that it's not my seat. It is an open seat every time the seat comes up for re-election. And that's great. I have no problem with that. Yes, it'll probably be costly, and that's what it is.
And there's a wonderful Paul Ryan quote that you can't be any good at this job unless you're prepared to lose it.
Yeah. And it's not mine. It's not my job. It's a temporary thing. I'm a citizen legislator, and I may or may not choose to run again. I don't know that. That's, to me, that is so far away that it's just not on the radar.
Just a question from being a former party chairman, just kind of thinking through the implications of two guys that are no longer serving, Dave Nething and Kurt Olofsson in the Senate. Do you think that sat over some people's minds in regards to this election when they voted in the chambers? Do you think that impacted at all?
Very definitely, I think it did. I think, and as I was saying before, I think that was an impetus, and now is our chance to really get some good pro-life legislation passed because we have a different chairman in judiciary.
I thought that might be the case.
Yeah, in the House, we've always stood that way in the House. I couldn't say that it has a grave effect in the House, but I think that the House has always stood very firm on the issues.
Gary Emineth, he's the gentleman who just spoke. He's my co-host, and he's a former, as he mentioned, a former state Democratic chairman.
Democrat.
Excuse me, Democrat. Oh, good Lord. I'm sorry. Beg your pardon.
They might be recruiting me.
Senator Nething did not stand for re-election last year, and one of the reasons why is because he was looking at a primary challenger, I believe, and he was the chairman of the Judiciary Committee. He was an opponent of a personhood bill that had gotten through the House and was in the Senate. And Kurt Olofsson, whom Gary, the former Republican Party chairman, mentioned earlier, Mr. Olofsson pulled off a maneuver during the floor debate on the bill that essentially prevented a vote on it. He moved that the bill be tabled. The bill was tabled. There was no vote on the bill itself. And this made a lot of people very upset. And during the redistricting of last year, actually 2 years ago, Senator Olofsson was put in the same district with another senator who had supported this bill, and they ran against each other, and the other senator, whose name is Joe Miller, he's a Republican from Park River, won the primary election rather decisively. And I do think that this, as you both mentioned, I do think that this was a factor in the fact that these bills won approval, because there's been sort of a demonstration of the muscle of folks that like bills like this and want to see them passed and want to see their representatives vote for them.
And overwhelmingly in that district where Curtis was at, the people spoke. and they spoke overwhelmingly and said, you know what, we are a pro-life district, and we are disappointed in this maneuver, and we are going to put a pro-life senator in that seat, and we're going to guarantee that spot. And that's very important in this. You know, there's so many people that want to look at it and they want to scream about Margaret, and they want to scream about me, and these so-called rallies that they were having, they tried to make them personal about us. And you know what? This isn't about us. None of this is about us. I was asked so many times today, what's your comment today on the governor signing the bills? You know what? This is a great day in North Dakota for babies. And that's what this is about. But beyond that, we speak for thousands and thousands of pro-life people in the state of North Dakota that wanted this done. And they have backed us all the way. And yes, you might see a vocal crowd that's out there that opposes this, but the question really falls and the burden falls to them, not to us, because we know we are in a pro-life state. The burden is, why is abortion so important to you? Why is it that you won't discuss the heartbeat? Tell me why you won't. Every argument has been about anything but the bill and about a heartbeat.
Senator City, could you say in about 20 seconds what it was like to have a bunch of folks show up outside your house?
Well, we just turned off the lights. We went to the kitchen table and we sat down and prayed, to be honest.
Very well. Thank you for your time. We've been talking to Senator Margaret City, who is a Republican from Bismarck, and Representative Betty Grandy, who is a Republican from Fargo. They are supporters of legislation that Governor Jack Dalrymple signed today that will restrict abortion in North Dakota. And Senator City is the prime sponsor of a constitutional amendment that will show up on the ballot in November of 2014 that says North Dakota will defend life at all stages of development. Thank you, ladies, for coming tonight.
Thanks so much for having us.
The Legislature Today is brought to you in part by Prairie Outpost Log Homes. Your